Next segment continues in the technology segment. You heard from Jay what disrupting the automotive industry looks like, building the disruptive technology for disrupting the dealer networks. More about it as we go forward. If you have questions, let me know. We will be having an automotive summit as well. Let's talk about something in the technology industry that this whole Silicon Valley is abuzz with. And it is something about Metaverse, NFTs, Web3, and many of us are literally scratching our head what these things mean. To believers, Web3 represents the next phase of the internet and perhaps for organizing the society. But what exactly is it? Let's try to understand what is Web 1.0. Web 1.0 was an era of decentralized open protocols in which most online activity involved navigating to individual static web pages. Remember the early days when internet came and everybody had a GeoCities web page? So that was the start of Web 1.0. And then came Web 2.0, which we are obviously living through now, is a era of centralization in which a huge share of communication and commerce takes place through the closed platforms owned by a handful of super powerful corporations. Think about Google, Facebook, Amazon, subject to the normal control of centralized government regulators. But Web3 is supposed to break the world free of all these shackles. And to talk about Web3, NFTs, all of that, who better than Sandy Carter? Sandy Carter is somebody who I have known through my IBM days. She was known as the Energizer Bunny, and you'll see very shortly. There is something called a category creator and a category disruptor. Sandy is both of them. Let me read her bio briefly. Sandy Carter is the Senior Vice President and Channel Chief at Unstoppable Domains. In this role, she's responsible for driving new partnerships and integrations for Web3, blockchain, and NFTs. She's the founder of Women of Web3. Her mission is to onboard the world onto the decentralized web by building blockchain-based identity platforms. Previously, Sandy was the Vice President for Public Sector Partners and Programs at AWS. And before that, there, she grew the partner ecosystem over 45% as the ecosystem contributed significantly to the success of the business at AWS. She recently left AWS, but prior to that, she was at IBM, as I said earlier. She was also a founder and CEO of a startup. And her last role at IBM, she ran cloud AI/ML ecosystem on behalf of the IBM Corporation. She's the chairman of Board of Girls in Tech and adjunct professor at Carnegie Mellon University in Silicon Valley. She's also the author of Extreme Innovation, 3 Superpowers for Purpose and Profit. She's a top 100 tech leader, very well decorated Federal 100 Award winner, member of Fortune Most Powerful Women and Women Leaders in Data and AI, Stevie Award winner. I could go on and on. The page is full, but she's a top 50 influencer, top woman in software as a service of 2021, and top 50 women in tech influencers to follow. We are very privileged to have her here with us. And I'm personally very grateful for Sandy to accept this invitation to come here on a Sunday. And with that, Sandy, welcome. ASCI is waiting to hear your wisdom.
Thank you so much. And it's such an honor. And of course, anytime that you would ask me, I would be here because I know the group that's on the phone is just completely amazing. I was going to start first, the way we had discussed, with some different areas of lessons that I learned and kind of what led me to where I am today. So I'm going to share my screen just really briefly.
Sure.
And start that conversation, if that sounds good for all of you guys. And I would say as well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon where you are in the world. It is a true honor to be here today. So I call this going down the rabbit hole, and going down the rabbit hole is a term that's used very frequently in Web3. And it essentially means, you start down one path and then you get to another and another, and pretty soon you're in all kinds of different things. So it's so exciting. And for me, just as a little bit of background, I actually wanted to be an astronaut. So I was really excited about what you guys were doing yesterday because, yesterday you had this whole mission on space. That was my original dream. Then I decided I wanted to be a doctor because I wanted to give back. And it turns out that all the smells in a hospital physically make me pass out. So I would not be a great doctor. Long story short, my advisor introduced me to technology. He was an advisor at tech and in the medical school, and got me hooked on technology. And I've been now doing technology for the last 20 years. I show you this picture because it's really interesting how life is so fun, right? It pivots on you. Because at my last role at AWS, I had the pleasure of working with a partner of ours, Maxar, and help them get rover movements to Mars. So I started wanting to be an astronaut when I was, 8, 9, or 10. And here, 20, 30 years later, I get to help not go to Mars myself, but personally to help the rover really learn things about Mars. So I thought that was really fascinating. So I was asked first to just kind of talk about some hacks for success and how I ended up where I am. And there are 3 things that I thought would be really interesting to share with you. The first is acting like an open API. I don't think I really need to explain that because we got a lot of technologists on this, but companies will share their expertise and they share that through an open API. Ask a gazillion questions and lead with purpose. So let me just give you a couple of stories around these. Hack number 1, acting like an open API. And what that means to me is that a lot of people will say that knowledge is power, right? He or she who holds the knowledge, controls the knowledge, is the most powerful one. But I would say the new world that we live in, he or she who opens up their API, opens up their knowledge, is really the one who's going to be most successful. It's the right way to lead in today's environment. And I love India. I've been to India so many times, and I was headed over to India to give a keynote and meet with some of my partners. And so I tweeted, hey, I'm headed over to India. I landed, it was a 21-hour flight. So I had mascara dripping down my face. I was really tired. I went to check into the hotel. As I checked in, the general manager came over to me and said, hey, Sandy, we've got this big group of people waiting for you. So I put them in one of the conference rooms. I was like, wow, I asked my team not to come because it was 11:30 p.m. at night. It was too late. Anyway, after I finished checking in, I ran down to the room. Again, remember, I have mascara dripping down my face. I've been flying for 21 hours. I opened the door. Everyone's doing the Bollywood dance. I'm like, oh, this must be a wedding or something. So I quickly shut the door, went back out, and the general manager said, no, those are the people waiting for you. And I'll still remember it to this day. I went back in the room. Anil came running up to me and he said, Sandy, I'm so happy you're here in India. How is your one-eyed dog? Because I adopted a dog that only had one eye. How are your 2 daughters? So clearly he knew me. And it turns out he had seen my tweet. I had never met him. He had seen my tweet that I was headed to India, decided he was going to come meet me. So asked his cousins, uncles, daughters, niece, where I was staying, where I would be. And then said, well, instead of just me coming, I'm the president of the social media club of Mumbai. I'll have everybody come. And sure enough, we had over 150 people that showed up in that big conference room. And he asked me a simple question at 11:30 p.m. at night. I've got a projector set up. Would you share your knowledge with us? And so I had a choice to make. Do I say, no, I've got a meeting tomorrow morning at 8 a.m.? Too late, let's do it another time, or do I just go ahead and do it? And so I decided to share. We were there till 2 a.m. It was a great time. And I will tell you, as I toured around Mumbai the next day, I would greet me and they would say, are you that crazy woman who stayed up till 2 a.m. with the social media club of Mumbai? And they would welcome me in. And then when I went to do my keynote, I got on the stage and I said, hi, I'm Sandy Carter. On the left-hand side was the social media club of Mumbai, who stood up and gave me a standing ovation for just introducing myself. I give you this hack because, you have a choice to make in life, and it's always better to share what you know. I thought the CEO that you just interviewed was amazing, sharing his insight. And I do believe that this is a big way to success, acting like an open API. My second big hack is asking a gazillion questions. And gazillion came from my daughter. I had asked a million questions and she goes, "Oh no, Mom, it's a gazillion questions." And what do I mean by this? Well, there's been research done. In fact, a friend of mine who's a professor at Stanford that found that the most innovative people in the world, Jeff Bezos, Steve Jobs when he was alive, Elon Musk, they ask hundreds and hundreds of questions in a day. But on average, we as adults, we ask on average 10 questions a day. We don't question a lot. We just take, okay, I need to go do this. I need to do that. We don't really ask those really tough questions. The questions that you just heard about, like, how do you disrupt the car industry? What does it really mean? What does the experience really look like? And, we kind of grow into that because as kids ask hundreds of questions a day, right? If you have kids, you know what I mean. Why is the sky blue? Why are the clouds? I mean, the question's just coming. And successful innovators ask a lot of questions, successful disruptors. So here is a picture when I was with AWS. We were looking at how do we get more people trained on artificial intelligence? There were so many needs. And of course, you could ask one question, how do you do that? And your answer would be, let's do more classes, right? But if you keep asking questions, how many people would that really get to? Would that really give us enough people with all the needs out there? You find out pretty soon that it's not enough. And so keeping asking questions leads you to real innovative things. And one of the things we came up with was, let's do more hands-on training for artificial intelligence. So we created this deep racer. It's 1/18 the size of a real racing car. It has IoT sensors on it. We set up deep racer leagues all over the world, and people race this race car through programming. But in order to race the race car, you have to know reinforcement learning, the basis of artificial intelligence. And imagine how many more people we train because we didn't just stop at that first question. How do I train more people? We kept asking questions. And then my last hack is everything you do, you need to do it with a purpose. I loved the panel, the women's panel, talking about a lot of those purposes. How will you give back? I think that in today's environment, it's really important. In fact, one of my mentors told me, always reach back and pull someone forward with you. Always have a purpose. So how do these relate to, to what we're going to be talking about today? Acting like an open API, asking a ton of questions, leading with purpose. Well, if you think about it, Web 3.0 represents a major rethinking, a new iteration of the World Wide Web. It's taking control of your information and giving it back to you, not giving it to a company. And so that means you have to reimagine and ask a lot of questions about how do you do that? Because there is a reason why Web 2.0 is the way it is today. It's more cost effective. Innovation can happen fast when you have just a few people making decisions. And so as you're thinking about Web 3, you have to go to people who have been doing this and ask a lot of questions, but also lead with purpose. Part of the purpose here is putting information back in the hands of the people, of us. And so I know I don't have a lot of time, but I wanted to show you a couple of pictures that I see that really helped me out. So on the left-hand side, you see there is this creator economies that are coming today in the world. It's really a two-sided market. On the other side are these digital networks that are existing. And at a very high level, it starts with that infrastructure, that Web 3.0, that decentralized access, which then needs to have trust and security, which is built on today crypto and blockchain. But the governance has to be done in a shared fashion. So you'll hear a lot about DIOs, or dynamically driven autonomous organizations who have these dynamic governance models. And that is where the metaverse is built. It requires all of these things underneath it. And then, of course, all the interfaces. If you were at CES this year, you saw, interfaces now that are not hand or touch based, but are really looking at how you think and different interfaces that exist out there today. Now, I know Prisha told me that we had a lot of engineers, so I thought I'd present that picture in a little bit different way too for our engineers that are out there. So starting on the bottom, you see all this new technology that even the CEO just referenced, blockchain that has the trusted on-chains, the distributed ledgers that are out there, the smart contracts, which everything is based on. Then you go up to the relationships that are really, if you look at wallets that have been created, let's take Coinbase or MetaMask, and then that decentralized identity that's so important. And then you have commerce that's done on exchanges or marketplaces or decentralized applications. And again, using those smart contracts to the way this is structured with peer-to-peer all the way up to that end user interface. So it introduces a ton of new concepts. So what I thought I would do is just kind of summarize for you guys the basic assumptions that Web3 is really built on. The first is that thought of decentralization. Although there are a lot of debates today, is it going to be fully decentralized or partially decentralized? For example, my company, Unstoppable today leverages some elements of decentralization, but still uses some elements of centralization. It's also built on the assumption that there will be this digital identity that you can take with you. Unlike today, if I sign up for Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter, that identity is different for each one. And that identity is really, the identity of Sandy is owned by that company. But in the new Web3 metaverse world, you own your identity. So you can take your expertise to any new social platform or any new metaverse that you go to. For example, we were just working with a new metaverse called Atlantis. And I'm able to transfer and take my identity with me from Atlantis to Meta, to the garden. I get to take that identity with me. It's not controlled by one company that exists just for that application. All of this today is built on the chain, or what we call the blockchain, which provides that level of security. And typically it's permissionless, which means that there is no in-between authority who's providing you permission. It's all peer-to-peer based. And the ultimate goal is that Web3 eventually ends up financially benefiting you, the user. And how is that? Well, if you own your identity and it's trusted on the blockchain, then imagine if you want to sell information about yourself to a company that wants to market to you, then you make that choice and you get paid for your information. So it's a whole different thinking, and that hopefully opens up a gazillion, as my daughter would say, a gazillion questions for you. It is very fast moving. And so one of the things I did do was I made kind of my big 12 projections for the year. You see, number one is that identity becomes the gateway to the metaverse. Really, everything depends on that digital identity. And that's why we at Unstoppable are working so hard to create that digital identity. And we just made an announcement with 58 partners around that. We see a lot of people going through the Great Resignation, and that will continue. And we're seeing them come into Web3. In fact, I was just looking at an article yesterday. 81% of people now working on Web3 have been there less than a year and a half. I also believe, I tweeted yesterday, Web2 companies will begin piloting with Web3 and blockchain concepts. In December, I had more Web2 companies come to me and start to put these elements on their roadmap. Ease of use will become much more important. And I'll just pick out another couple. Number 7, I love the women's panel. I think that this is an opportunity as Web3 is being built, that women and diverse groups embed themselves in early. It's one of the reasons I decided to leave AWS, which was an amazing company, and come to a Web3 company, because I want to make sure that we have diversity embedded in from the very, very beginning. And the other interesting thing here is if you think about Web 2, Web 2 really thinks about users. Web 3 thinks about members, because you are part of the membership. And this mindset is also a very different mindset as you move forward. We're already seeing NFTs. If you don't know what an NFT is, it's a non-fungible token. There are all kinds of digital assets and physical assets that are non-fungible tokens. But now you can see emerging a whole new world of music and art. And we're seeing, again, a lot of diverse groups, like Ancient Warriors last night announced 4,444 new pieces of art from Black and brown creators all over the world. They sold out in less than an hour. So this whole concept is creating the next generation of creators, as well as the next generation of entrepreneurs. I think that this will be the future of where we're headed. And because of that, we have to reimagine everything. So in a decentralized world, what do benefits look like? What does a culture look like? What does payroll look like? So it's not just the front end that's being reimagined, but it's the entire back end as well. And then my final prediction here is around Web 3.0 and the Metaverse. It's very difficult to understand today, so it's not really mainstream. There are about 200 million what we consider crypto native users, and they get it. They get it right away. But since I've moved over from the Web 2 world, I'm now mentoring and tutoring and doing classes for people in depth on what is Web 3. And it's still a really hard concept. And so I think for it to really have more mainstream adoption, it's got to be more precisely defined. You got to have that elevator pitch as you go forward as well, which is another reason I'm really excited to be here to help create that elevator pitch, to help train that next generation of creators and entrepreneurs. So that's my 15-minute kind of spiel I wanted to share with you, both in terms of, how today I kind of got where I am. As you can see, if you're acting like an open API, part of the reason I got interested in Web3 is people said, hey, I want to come talk to you about a concept. And I took those meetings and I just got really excited about it. I asked a gazillion questions, and I have a gazillion more questions that I need to ask and understand. And I do believe there is purpose here, because making sure your identity travels with you. Imagine the possibilities and the purpose, giving that back to you, where your school records will travel with you. My daughter during COVID, she took some classes out of college, and I wanted to get those credits so that she could take them with her when she goes into, college. It was so hard. Why is it so hard? If you had a digital identity and part of that identity was the classes and your skills that you took, she could just take that identity with her everywhere. You can imagine it for healthcare and for finance. Anyway, it has lots of potential and lots of opportunity. So thank you guys for having me on and for, really enabling me to share this story. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter, or lots of ways to get a hold of me as well.
Hey, Sandy, you still have some more time here with us, so please stay. We may have some questions from the audience.
Yeah.
I don't see a question right now. I was busy trying to see where the next panelist, and you had time till 11:30. So truly you have 6 more minutes here. And okay. I'm trying to see if anyone wants to ask any question. I can see the panelists coming up for the next one, but we definitely want to give you the full time.
Yeah. Yeah. So any questions that you guys have for me, I'd love to take those as well. Yeah.
Sure. So
there's one question.
So there is, I'd love to learn more about how trust will. It's an incomplete question, but if you can clarify that. Let's see, how trust will be portrayed in the future. in the metaverse?
Yeah.
So talking about metaverse.
I'm sorry, say it again.
Talking about metaverse and trust.
Right. Yeah. So trust in the future, everything will be decentralized, but you still need to have some sort of trust built in. And so instead of that trust being done through a central authority, let's take a bank, for example. So today, if I want to buy something, typically I would go and meet someone at the bank, and the trusted authority to verify us would be that bank. In the future, what we see is that authentication happens at a user level. It's borderless, it's a frictionless, it's a concept of the web that is really prevalent in everything that Web3 is built on, idea of payments and smart contracts. So because of the blockchain, and the blockchain being immutable trust, that real ownership model is being done at that level. And that makes the future of digital identity to be so much more important than it is today. It'll be used in all kinds of apps that we can't even really imagine today. And it's extremely important that this ownership rights is in the hands of the users, not necessarily in the hands of a government or a corporation. So I see one question coming in here. How would you get started? Well, here's what I really recommend when you're looking to get started, especially in a brand new space. This is just really starting. One is there is a whole set of new terminology, right? Web3, DIO, DApp, DeFi, and the list goes on, trust, fiat. I think the first thing you need to do is to really be curious, learn and be curious, ask a gazillion questions, join a couple of great conferences like this one so that you really start to understand. The second thing I would recommend that you do is that you experiment and you play, get a wallet, get Coinbase, Metaverse, buy some crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, get a domain name, which is one of the reasons I came here. A domain name really helps you to do that transaction and have that trusted capability. And then experiment. If you're a business, I have tons of use cases you can look at. In-game economics, DeFi, decentralized finance, a governance experience, content creation experiences. Take a look at them and start to experience them. And then get involved with some of the communities. These communities typically today, NFTs are done primarily on Twitter, so kind of bringing back Twitter. But other areas that are really popular are Discord, which started out as a gaming platform, and Telegram. So for example, Polygon, who's really big, a big company I admire out of India, all my discussions are done through Telegram. So those are some of the pieces of advice I would give you. And if you're interested in learning more, again, please reach out to me. Make sure you explore it, because I do believe by 2025, every company will have Web3 blockchain embedded in it in some form or fashion.
Great set of advice and resources available there. And you and I, when we chatted, you said you are going to be creating some courses as well, and some knowledge sharing, as well as any kind of enablement. If you roll out, do let us know. I want to make sure the ASCI members get that. And I was chatting with some other members here, and the youngsters in our community, they have already started, like my kids, they have a Coinbase account and they do crypto. I don't, unfortunately. But there's one person in our community who has actually started NFT trading. And so that was one of the impetus actually to reach out to you, because now you are showing us the path. And having seen you as a category builder, category disruptor, and a real person to know, from the SOA days, service-oriented architecture, that's the first book of yours I got. And then how you came from IBM to Amazon. It's an amazing story. But more important is the story you told my small audience, when I did that at a university, how you became from an engineer to an executive to a leadership position. If you can just take a couple of minutes to talk about that.
Yeah, so my background, I graduated in engineering, computer science, and math, and I thought that was all I ever wanted to do. But one of the things when I started developing and designing products, people would want to understand them. And the engineers that I were working with, they would say, I don't want to explain it to anybody. You explain it to someone, you know? So I would be that person who would start to explain the technology. And as I started to explain the technology, you know, being able to develop the technology is such a powerful skill, but you have to be able to explain it, have the right UX on it, both in terms of the message as well as for the product itself. And so my executive team therefore started putting me in positions where I could explain more things. And because I could bridge both worlds, the business world as well as the technology world, it just put me in a great situation. I always thank my advisor for that, because he advised me to go and get an MBA so I could explain things well, communicate, and then do the technology side. And then, you know, with a lot of luck, with a lot of great teams, I, you know, grew to be an executive where I never forget my roots. I always dabble with stuff. I always experiment and play with it, because I feel like if you don't understand it, you won't be successful. And then figure out how to extrapolate it to something that people can understand. So you can kind of see, even in the charts I did today, right? There are so many really detailed technology charts, but to get people to understand, you've got to elevate it up a little bit so that people can grasp it before you go into the details. So I hope that was a story that you were thinking of. But,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That is really, you know, and again, you're never, you know, it's always about your tribe. I have an amazing set of cheerleaders, of mentors, of teammates who, you know, have always contributed to that success. You never can do anything by yourself.
Wonderful, Sandy. Thank you for being my mentor, and thank you for being here. And in our tradition, we say namaste. And thank namaste. You with my folded hands. It's my soul thanking you to your soul. Stay connected. Let's be social with social distancing. Let's get on to the next session.